Alright, sorry about that. Some goofball was knocking on the door, as you could hear the pounding in the background. Let's start over with the walking flipbook. So in order to make the walk sequence, we need the idle sprite, and then we need the one where Mario has his foot forward, looks like he's starting to walk. So with both of those selected, you can right-click and create flipbook. The sprites that you have selected are all going to be combined together as frames in this flipbook. So when I click create flipbook, and I name this Mario walking underscore flipbook, stay organized, you can see as soon as I hit enter, it starts to animate. He's moving a little bit fast here, so I'm going to double click on this, open it up, and here's the animation. Down bottom, you can see the two different frames, the two sprites that combine together to make this flipbook animation. In the top right, you have a frames per second window. If you lower this number down, you can reduce the speed of the animation. So if I take this down to a 7 or an 8, whatever you think is appropriate for your character and animation. Go ahead and click Save in the top left. Close this window down. Now you can see it's animating in my content browser a lot better. All right, let's continue. So we need to make one for the fall. Mario falling, flipbook, Mario crouch, flipbook, and so I have one for the crouch, one for the fall, one for the idle, one for the jump, one for the walk. So we have 5 animations for our 5 different sprites. Okay? So let's go ahead and start plugging these in. So in the editor here, we have our default 2D side-scroller character. And if you click on it, you can also see the world outliner in the top right. This is a list of all the assets that you have currently in your level. Sometimes it's useful to use the search up top to search for things if you know what they're called. This list can get very long and quite confusing if you don't stay organized and name things appropriately. So I'm going to click on the 2D side-scroller character, and we'll see that this character is facing to the right to begin with, and see how Mario, our character, is facing to the left. That's going to be a problem in the future, but it's a really easy fix. If our character was designed facing to the right, then this wouldn't be a problem at all. It's just one more step that we're going to have to do. And again, this is only a problem because the default character is facing to the right. That's just how the code was written for this default project. All right, I have my 2D side-scroller character selected. I'm going to go over to the right to the Details panel. The Details panel has all sorts of details and different parameters that you can change for the thing that you have selected. In this case, I have a character that is comprised of a sprite and a flipbook of multiple sprites. You can see the idle animation right here on that character, kind of makes it look like he's breathing. I'm going to go ahead and just drag my Mario idle flipbook on top of that. And I should see right away that Mario pops up on my screen. That makes sense. I've replaced the default flipbook with Mario. As soon as I go to play this game or anything like that, it's going to jump back to the original character. But when I'm in the editor now, at least I see Mario. The reason that it jumps back to the original character when I click play is that we haven't set any of the code up. We've just pasted a graphic on top of the placeholder in the editor, but we need to do all the code. We'll look at one more thing with sprite extraction here, and then we're going to wrap up this video and move into creating the functionality. All right, so down here I have a sprite a sprite sheet that consists of a bunch of different platforms and trees and rocks and flowers and mushrooms and some water and clouds, a bunch of different assets. I'm going to right click on this and go to Sprite Actions Extract. It's going to take a minute because it's quite a lot of graphics packed in here. If I make this window a little bit bigger for you, you can see that it's extracted the sprites. Some of these that's okay for. For the sprites that have rounded edges and undercuts like this, that might be a little bit more of a problem. Would have to go in and manually extract the sprites. For our purposes right now, it's fine though. So we can just keep it on auto. Let this process. All right, in the bottom right, we can click Extract again. This is a lot of different sprites, so it's going to extract all of these all at once. Then we might have to go in afterwards if we want to use some of these platforms with undercuts and rounded edges on them and fix the collision. If it's going to matter for our character. If our character's never going to be climbing underneath these platforms where they might bump their head into them, then collision's not really going to matter. Alright, so we have a platform here, and I want to show you just the collision for a second. So if I can see that on the right here there's a collision section, and these are default settings. But let me show you what the actual collision looks like. So if you click the Show button and go to Collision, it's going to show you the collision around the object. And sometimes I like to change the view mode. Currently it's set to right here, to perspective, and then rotate the object. If I zoom in really close, you can see this faint purple line. That is my collision right now. And you can see it's really narrow. Traditionally, in a 3D game, this collision would wrap around the entire 3D object, but since we're in 2D and we're two-dimensional, we can only really go left and right and up and down. We don't really have to worry about depth so much. This has a collision thickness of 10. That's the default. Usually that's going to be fine, again, because we're working with 2D. So in this case, this platform looks okay. But I want to show you an example of a platform where we'd have to do custom collision on it. So one of these rounded platforms here. So if I click on Show Collision for this one, I don't even have to rotate it. You see the purple line here is a square around the entire object. What I want is, if I wanted my character to be able to duck under this, maybe walk under a little bit of the curve here, I'd want the collision to follow the edge of the platform itself. Right now it doesn't. It's just a squared off edge, which means I'm going to bump into this invisible wall right here. So if I want to change that, I'm going to have to go over here to the collision section and look at my options here. I can pick tight bound, shrink wrapped, and fully custom. Fully custom is going to allow you to do a sort of like a polygonal lasso tool in Photoshop where you can set the collision. Shrink wrapped, if I click that, it basically sucks the collision to the surface of the graphic, ignoring transparency. You can see it's a much more complex shape, and depending on the type of game and the level of collision fidelity that you need, this may or may not be good enough. For my purposes, if I just want the character to be able to walk under it a little bit, this is more than good enough. So if you're happy with that, you can go ahead and click Save, and then it would be saved. If I want to put some graphics in my level now, I'm going to take this default ledge here, and you can see the source sprite over in the details panel. When I click on it is the ledge sprite. I'm just going to replace that with one of my platforms from Mario, and just drag that in. And these could be animated too. If these platforms were, I don't know, they had, I don't know, you're in some sort of caverns or something, and it has like there's sparkles of gold in the dirt of the platform, and the sparkles are animated. These platform sprites could be flipbooks as well, but for our purposes right now, they're not. They're just single frame sprites. They're not animations. So if I click on that, and you're going to end up with some sizing issues most likely. Again, because we're using a default project here. We can size this stuff down using the scaling tools. Remember, all of our transformation tools are up top here. Scale is the one that's yellow right now. If I hit scale is also the R key, rotation is the E key, and W is the translate key. So if I hit W to translate, I can move that platform down, something that looks like it lines up with Mario's feet. You can also use the space bar to cycle through the different widgets, translate, rotate, and scale. I'm going to add another one of these on here. And you can easily duplicate things in Unreal the same way you can in Photoshop with the Move tool. If you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard, or I guess Option if you're on a Mac, you can drag off a copy. So I dragged off a copy there. I'm going to move this platform up a little bit. And yeah, I guess that's fine for now. Maybe I'll get rid of this one and move these ones over so we can have some semblance of a game here. All right. I'm going to save my game now. Remember, in Unreal, you have projects, which is what this is called up here. I named my project Side Scroller Demo when we created it. And inside a project, you can have any number of maps. Think of maps like levels. So the project is Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers consists of a bunch of different levels. Inside those levels are a bunch of different assets. So a project holds the assets, the graphics, the sounds, the sprites in this case. It holds all that stuff together. Projects can't really share assets. You can migrate between assets between projects, but they don't communicate to each other. Levels can share assets because they're all in the same project. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I recommend always doing a save all. The reason for that is if you just do a save, it's just saving the level and the changes that you've done to it. It's not actually baking any of the graphics that you've imported, or not just graphics, but any sort of assets that you've imported into the content browser. It's not baking them into the project. And you can see that if I zoom in here on these sprites, see how they have a little asterisk in the bottom left corner? An asset in the content browser that has an asterisk next to it like that means it hasn't saved. So if I were to just close this down and ignore any warnings, if I lost power, if my computer crashed, and I hadn't saved this stuff, I would have to re-import it again and recreate it, and that would be a real pain in the butt. So File, Save All, otherwise Control-Shift-S is keyboard shortcut. Just get used to using that shortcut. All right, I'm going to click play, see what happens here. Again, it jumps back to the original graphic. We haven't set any of the code up for that yet. Our platforms are there, but our character is not. So I'm going to stop the recording right there, and we'll move into doing the functionality for the code next. But that's how we import sprites, create flipbooks, and bring them into the editor.